Welcome to the second video of this class. Now we're going to talk about the collapse of social democracy. Actually, before we're starting talking about the collapse of social democracy, we need to understand what social democracy is. And in order to understand social democracy, we have to go back to the period of time after World War II, when particularly in Scandinavian countries, left-wing parties developed a welfare system, a welfare state, in which within capitalism is corrected, so to say, from within, from inside, and how by introducing solidarity, by using democratic procedures in the decision making of welfare as well. So I think we more or less talked about welfare state in these classes very briefly, though. But by the end of the day, what we have here is a world in which social services, a national health system, or we talk about education, or we talk about, anything that is job market related that provides for a safety net for workers. All those benefits, all those provisions are part of what social democracy aims, at least theoretically, to develop. By the end of the day, is the intervention of the state through expenditure, through social expenditure, to correct capitalism from inside capitalism. So living within that economic system and accepting it as the best possible system, how to correct those negative effects of the market. So actually, through the second half of the 20th century, social democracy was kind of ruling across Europe. Up until the 80s. In the 80s, actually, through Washington, what we know as Washington Consensus, actually Washington Consensus was a bit later, because it was 1989, IMF, World Bank, etc., with dictating new economic policy, but also Ronald Reagan or in the US, or Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, reinterpreted neoliberalism and made it the dominant trend in the world. And obviously this resulted in the need of social democracy of reinterpreting itself and re-understanding itself to kind of compete with this, kind of new ideology and to make it more attractive to the electorate. How did this happen? I'm going through history very briefly, but this is what I can do. How did this happen? We can say that the first attempt and the clearest attempt was with Tony Blair in the United Kingdom in the early 90s. The mind behind this third way was Anthony Giddens, and professor, I think, LSE. And it was actually taking concept of finding, exactly this, a third way in between what traditional social democracy understood it was necessary through social expenditure, but also introducing terminology of the market here in terms of efficiency of the programs, who profits, targeted programs, how to manage these programs, etc., etc. So by the end of the day, it's a travel to the center, of the ideological center of the spectrum by left-wing parties, by social democratic parties all across Europe. And now I'm going to put a few examples of what happened, because during and after the economic crisis in some countries where left-wing parties were ruling, because this was an issue. By the end of the day, people in particularly Southern European countries, because at that time were the ones where left-wing governments were ruling, social democratic governments were ruling, blamed these governments of not giving a left-wing answer to the crisis. And what happened is, for example, in Greece with PASOK, Panellistic Socialist Party, I think I don't recall the acronym exactly, but we can see that how PASOK was almost the hegemonic party in Greece, and they were ruling after the 2009 elections. And with the economic crisis, they had to call for a snap election, so they lost the support of the people. And they went from 43% of the vote to 13% of the vote in just 3 years. So this tells you about the collapse of the party itself, and PASOK has never recovered from it. Actually, and who took that space in Greece? In Greece, it was Syriza. Syriza was a left-wing, was to the left of PASOK, so not a travel to the center, but quite the opposite, a travel to the left, who took over. And if we go back to that graph, we see how, I mean, actually they overtake them in 2012 elections, but in 2015 elections, Syriza wins these elections and actually held the government in Greece for 4 years up until 2019, up until last year when they lost to a center-right wing party. Syriza will be like Podemos in Spain, pretty much, very similar. I mean, actually, there you can see a picture of Pablo Iglesias to the right with a mustache, and Tsipras, who is the leader of Syriza in Greece. So actually, who took that space that the social democracy left in Greece, it was actually to the left. It was Syriza. What happened in France? In France, Parti Socialiste, I mean, you can see the results there. And 2012, I mean, you know that in France, it's a semi-presidential system. They have a two-round system. So in the first round, every single party competes with a candidate to the president of the republic. The two candidates with the most votes will go to a second round. And we can see, for example, how in 2007, Ségolène Royal competed and lost in the second round. In 2012, actually, François Hollande, he made it to the second round and actually won more than 50% of the vote. So he was the president of the republic from 2012. However, the management of the crisis was, I mean, and the popularity of Hollande was terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. There was a point during his mandate that his popularity, I think, was 7%. So you can imagine. And in 2017, they presented Hamon. And you can see the results, less than 10%. That was around 7% of the vote that they got. So they imploded. And who took the space of the Parti Socialiste? Because obviously this share of the vote had to go somewhere. And actually, in this case, it was not to the left, it was to the center. And it was En Marche. Emmanuel Macron. And Macron was landslide majority in France. So actually, this would be pretty much like original Ciudadanos. So what Macron was at this time was what Ciudadanos was at the beginning. So you will see later that Ciudadanos, well, actually I can tell you now, in 2017, Ciudadanos decided that it was not a social democratic party anymore, it was a liberal party. I mean, by the end of the day, they just changed. I mean, they reshaped their ideology to compete to the right of the spectrum in Spain. So we have two examples. Greece that actually left wing took over what the social democracy left in the center left, and in France it was the center who took over the center left. Actually, Macron, I have to tell you, he was a minister. He was the minister of the economy with the Hollande government. So with the socialist government, he was a minister. But yeah, I mean, politics. What happened in Spain? Actually, in Spain we see the same thing, the same pattern, how PSOE collapsed. And we see how, obviously, this is the 80s. We know about this time with Felipe González. Here they have that transition when Aznar was governing. And here we have Zapatero. And here in 2011, they got the worst result of their history in the current phase of our democracy. And at this point, we were asking ourselves the same question: what is going to happen with PSOE? I mean, is it following the same process that PASOK in Greece or Parti Socialiste in France? I mean, and actually the results were, there was not a clear contender yet in 2011. However, in 2014, they chose Pedro Sánchez as leader. This should be here. Yeah, they chose Pedro Sánchez as leader. Yeah, sorry, this was here. And to compete in the elections in 2015. And I mean, if you compare this picture of Pedro Sánchez with the pictures we're going to be seeing next week, I mean, next Wednesday and next week, just make a comparison. You know that he's the current president of Spain. So he was elected in 2014 to run against the PEN. However, in 2014, so they already knew that they were competing with the Ciudadanos from the center and with Podemos from the left. What happened, even though PSOE actually, as we saw before, got 20 seats less in parliament, actually PSOE survived. And this was the key. We saw before how Parti Socialiste in France and PASOK in Greece did not survive. There were alternatives that beat them in the elections. PSOE, I mean, dodged the bullet in the 2015 elections. And this was a breaking point, a turning point for PSOE, because, I mean, from 2015, they improved the results. And actually, you know that they are the party in government right now in Spain. So pretty much the the social democracy kind of collapsed in Spain, but it survived. It survived. Well, we'll see next week how it did. Okay, guys, this was about it. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you again on Wednesday.